Was the movie The Truman Show prophetic? Many people think so, not just because of obvious things like reality shows, but because of much more. Everything we share or consume on social media. The way we act and live based on what we were taught since childhood to be part of a system, a mold. Is this a conspiracy theory or a reality that maybe we should take a closer look at? Welcome. This is Conscious Conversations, and today we're going to analyze the themes presented in The Truman Show and explore whether we are, in some way, becoming more like Truman than like a free human being, with our own thoughts and decisions, or if we are inside a system that keeps us manipulated without us even realizing it, just to fit into a mold. The movie begins with Christoph explaining, "I'm tired of actors. I want to see genuine emotions." And he explains how his show is more authentic because Truman is the protagonist of his reality show 24/7 without knowing he's being filmed, that everything in his life is fake. Even his loved ones are actors. Throughout the film, we see Truman's life with his wife Meryl through the cameras and Christoph's editorial eye. Until one day, the system begins to fail. A stage light falls. Truman hears his movements being narrated on the radio, and this starts to unsettle him. At this point, Truman begins to observe more and realize that something isn't right. This moment can be seen from a psychological or spiritual perspective. It's that point where everything in your life seems to be going well, but you feel that despite doing everything that is expected of you, you're not 100% happy. You feel like something is missing, maybe a void or a feeling like, if I'm doing everything that is expected of me, why do I suddenly feel like something is missing? Why do I sometimes feel like I could be doing something more with my life? What is truly important? Am I going to live like this until old age and that's it? Going back to the movie, when Truman is on his way to work, he hears a fake advertisement about the terrible risks of flying. Then his boss gives him an assignment that involves getting close to the water, and Truman can't do it. When he returns home to talk to his wife, she acts very strangely, as she is promoting a product. Truman becomes even more suspicious that something is wrong. He goes with his supposed best friend Marlin to the beach, where Truman says he wants to travel, that he wants to leave Sea Haven, the fake town he doesn't know is actually a massive television set. And we learn about a trauma that was created for Truman as a child, watching his father supposedly die in a boating accident. The director triggers rain to make the scene more dramatic for the audience and for Truman himself. At this point, we are already seeing something much darker than just lying. Here we see how the director created trauma in a child to prevent him from trying to escape by water, which is the only way out of the set, since Truman believes he lives on an island. And I want to pause here for a moment, because since we are children, we don't just learn how to read and write, we also learn all kinds of prejudices: racial, political, socioeconomic, ideological. And this shapes the way we see the world and how we behave. We also learn what is expected of us to be successful. The template that most of us grew up with: study, work a 9-to-5 office job, get married, have children, work more, and continue like this until the end. But does anyone really question if that's what they want in life? Maybe you don't want to work in an office, or get married, or have children. I'm not saying these things are bad or undesirable, they're just examples. The real question is, are we making conscious decisions, or are we trying to fit into a pattern we grew up with? Maybe you do want these or other things, Maybe for you, there are less traditional paths that are more aligned with who you are and what you truly want from life. Something very interesting happens with Truman here. Despite the beliefs implanted in him and all the propaganda reinforcing the idea that traveling or leaving Sea Haven is dangerous, Truman decides to move forward and tries to buy a plane ticket to leave the island. At this point, despite fear and media control, intuition, or what some call a spiritual awakening, begins to emerge. It's not that you don't feel fear, but deep down you know you need to resolve that doubt, that lingering feeling inside you. As the story progresses, we see how Truman gradually awakens to the truth. He starts noticing things he probably wouldn't have noticed before, like the actors behind the elevator with catering, how he can stop traffic. And here something important appears: the resistance of the system and its attempts to regain control. He notices how people act strangely, predictably, repeating the same things in loops, giving explanations for what's happening that Truman can no longer accept. He is already seeing that things are not what they seem, and he can't ignore it. And something even more painful: the people he trusted and loved the most are part of this system. In real life, this can feel very familiar, and it's a difficult part of the process. This is what in spirituality or psychology is called awakening consciousness, or the beginning of the dark night of the soul. Suddenly, you no longer feel aligned with the narrative around you. You feel more alone. You see that your questions, or the changes you want to make in your life, make others uncomfortable. They don't accept them or speak to you from their own fears, and you begin to process this more quietly or with the help of a therapist. Because yes, when you step out of the system, it's uncomfortable for others. And this can happen even with small decisions or questions, like choosing to eat less processed food, questioning whether you really want to be a parent, whether you want to live in the place where you were born forever or travel more, whether you want a fully traditional life or changes that are more aligned with who you are and how you want to live your life. When Truman tries to talk about what's happening to him with his wife, she changes the subject and promotes a coffee brand. Does that sound familiar? Not the ad itself, but the idea of, I'm going to distract you and change the subject so you stop thinking, questioning, analyzing. In the middle of all this chaos, Truman finds a piece of clothing from Sylvia, whom he knew as Lauren, the woman he fell in love with years before, and who tried to tell him the truth. At this point, Truman no longer believes explanations that contradict the reality he is seeing, and he is determined to discover the truth. When Truman is already desperate because of the flight he couldn't take, the bus that supposedly broke down, the streets with traffic that suddenly disappeared, he decides he can't take it anymore and drives with his wife to a bridge over the fake sea. He pauses for a moment because of the trauma created around water. At this point, his determination to find the truth is stronger, and he manages to cross the bridge, only to be stopped. Back home, he realizes his wife is part of the system, part of the lie, part of everything strange he is seeing and feeling, and something he no longer accepts as absolute truth. This is a genuine first attempt to break out of the automatic system he now realizes he's trapped in. And it's an important moment, because even though it failed, he didn't give up. And this is something that is also part of our process. It's not fast, and it doesn't work perfectly the first time. It's gradual, it requires courage, and it takes time. It's a deep inner change where there is doubt and sometimes fear, but once you've opened your eyes, It's something you simply can't ignore anymore. Even after the conversation with his best friend Marlon, where he even questions whether he might be going crazy, Truman realizes Marlon is just another piece of the system. The next day, Truman goes on with his life as if nothing happened. He greets his neighbors, goes to work, pretends everything is normal. But he can no longer ignore what he has seen. So, he faces his greatest fear, the sea. Determined to find the truth and accepting that he can't keep living like this, he risks his life by sailing into what he believes is the open ocean. When Kristoff manipulates the weather and creates storms that almost drown him, Truman says something very revealing and very brave. He says he will continue, that nothing will stop him. In that moment, it's not that he doesn't feel fear, it's that his need for truth is much greater. This is another point we can relate to. It's a more raw, solitary, and difficult version of the earlier stage where you were starting to change. It's about sustaining that change and going through it, even when it feels like the whole world is against you and no one understands you. Even though objectively that's not true, many people around the world are waking up, using terms like spiritual awakening, breaking out of the matrix, or truly getting to know yourself. Even if the process isn't exactly beautiful, knowing that it's what aligns with you. Going back to Truman, we see his boat crash into what looked like the horizon and break through it. We see the mix of emotions he feels: relief, a sense of, I'm not crazy, but also sadness, processing what he just discovered. As he walks along the edge and climbs the stairs, we see determination despite uncertainty. Here, we also see one final attempt by the system, represented by Kristoff, who offers him a supposedly better world if he chooses to stay. Truman takes a moment, says goodbye without resentment, delivers his iconic line, and walks toward the darkness of that open door, where nothing can be seen beyond it. This represents the final doubt before choosing to continue your process. The fact that the door doesn't show what's on the other side represents uncertainty. It's like saying, I don't know exactly what's on the other side, but I know I can't stay here anymore. I choose uncertain truth over a comfortable lie. And of course, this is not the end of the process, but the movie portrays the initial stage, when you start noticing that something isn't right, that things are not coherent. Reality begins to confirm it, and you gradually choose to wake up and decide from awareness and your own judgment, not from automatic mental programming. Everything in this movie is intentional and represents something. Let's look at it briefly, not only in Truman's world, but in ours. Kristoff represents powerful elites, the people with the most money who make the most important decisions worldwide. His name is also a wordplay combining Christ and off, using the image of Jesus as an omnipresent, omnipotent God, but also suggesting something is off, something not good, a kind of control that is not loving as he describes it at the beginning. The actors in Truman's life represent large corporations that often promote false narratives and spread misinformation. This serves their economic interests and aligns with the elites, as these dynamics keep the masses controlled and misinformed, which gives them power. They also represent people who are asleep or living on autopilot, which we see clearly at the end. When the show ends, they simply move on with their lives, asking what else there is to watch, what the next distraction will be. Truman symbolizes people like you and me, trapped in a system where everything you see manipulates you, reinforces ideologies, and tries to keep you within a mold where you can be predictable, controllable, and profitable. even at the cost of your own life. There's also something beautiful in Truman's name. It's a wordplay meaning true man, real man. He was the only one who wasn't acting. He was himself the entire time. We see the path he went through to take control of his own life and become a little more free. Although I've used words like elites, mass control, misinformation, and system, my intention is not to present or entertain a conspiracy theory, but to encourage us to look at our own lives and our world more consciously. The movie talks about mass media, and now we also have social media. In those spaces, we see and share small, edited parts of real life, versions often created to look appealing, not the full reality. There are viral topics that spread misinformation and narratives, and something even more dangerous, the equivalent of Christoph as editor and system creator, is now amplified by how social media algorithms work. Let me give you an example with an idea that I don't think anyone watching this video actually believes. The idea that the Earth is flat. If you search for information about this, algorithms will keep confirming and reinforcing that idea, even though we know it's not true. And that's dangerous, because if it happens with this, what else can it happen with? If there's one thing I want you to take away after watching this video, it's this. You have the ability to think for yourself. And although we've all grown up with systems and implanted ideas, deciding who you are and how you want to live your life is something deeply personal. And you don't have to follow any socially accepted mold if it's not aligned with you and the life you want. Have you ever felt this way? Because I have, and I've gone through this process multiple times. Let me know in the comments. I think we can help each other that way. If you enjoy these kinds of conversations, not just about this, but about any topic, looking at it a little deeper, this is your space. This is Conscious Conversations. If you liked this content, it would really help me if you leave a like. It's free and helps this information reach more people. See you in the next video.